like Miami. Miami, 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 Miami. Miami, 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 Miami. It feels like Miami.
Welcome to the Heat Podcast. I'm your host, Carlo Navas, and with me today, on the bottom, maybe the voice of reason of our podcast a lot of the time. The yin to my yang, the opposite of every take I have. Siobhan.
What's up? Hey, G. Good to meet you again. What's up, people out there?
On the right, and by the way, just a little history. Siobhan and I really got into in the group chat, in which ended with her saying, "I'm done with you," which she was right, by the way.
That happened.
It happens. Listen, who hasn't been done with me?
It.
Yeah, you can mean it a little bit, but not too much. On the right, listen, this is, if you're OG Heat Twitter from like Big 3 Heat Twitter, you know who the fuck Danny Martinez is. No introduction for the OGs. Danny, for the new audience, you're a staple of our community, and I'm really happy to have you on, man. Thank you for making the time.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to be on. A little sad that Dose made his appearance on the Heat Beat platform before I did. But, it's okay. We take it in stride, and we use every day to get 1% better. So, I appreciate you guys having me on. This is awesome. I'm very excited.
He used like single mothers to get on. It was like really like a dirty trick by him. He used charity and like all this stuff. The Juices is really like, they hit low. They play dirty. I'm not gonna lie. Crab's been on that. Yeah, I've been saying that for years. So we have a lot to get to. This is the first MHB in a bit because we've done a lot of hangover times. We haven't had a lot of off days. But we're here together. They quite the roller coaster, Siobhan. So we have the big game in Milwaukee where they beat the brakes off the defending champs. Then they go into Indiana, a place that, as Danny noted on his Twitter account, is fucking haunted for Miami. They've won Danny, was it 7 times since Dwayne got here?
Yeah, not great.
Yeah, they don't win unless it's in the playoffs. Yeah, so they go into a place that's just historically tough for them to play. They lose. But it was just the way they lost, right? They look like Heat of old of last year, which was the most frustrating basketball team I think I've watched in many, many years. And then they play last night, and for the most part, I think they look really solid, led wire to wire, pretty much double digits the whole time. And Siobhan, obviously the Lowry impact. How are you feeling about them? 3 games in, because we have the real up, the real down, and then we're back up again. We beat the Nemesis Magic, who always kick our ass early in the season.
I think you said kind of the Lowry impact. When he's there, they look good. They look organized. They look structured. They have a flow for what it is that they want to do. We're getting kick ahead. Jimmy's getting easy looks, probably some of the easiest baskets he's been able to get since he's been in a Heat uniform. Bam has someone that's not only feeding him, but forcing him to kind of push the button, right? I'm going to kick it to you. You can kick it right back to me, but I'm giving it right back to you. Work this little guy. I don't know if it's the issue, but the things, that draw our attention is what the team looks like when Kyle isn't there. It's only been 1 game, but we expect it to, be a bit more as the season goes on. And so they need to figure out a way to generate a freer flowing offense without that guy. And like you said, Tiff said a bunch too, like they look like the team of last year, stagnant, just kind of, not really sure of themselves almost. And, I think, like I said, when Kyle's here, they look good. I think that the other new guys are rounding a bit into form and are finding ways that they can help be effective. But I think a lot of it is going to be on the staples, right? The Jimmy, the Bam, Tyler, and his continued progression to, kind of take this team where it feels it's capable of going.
So, Danny, I think one of the more interesting parts early season, and it's something I'm going to monitor a lot going forward, and there's like a couple things that we can get to on like what statistical indicators I want to monitor, but it's offense when Kyle Lowry's off the floor. So when he's on, they're at 117 offensive rating. When he's off, that drops to 103. The defense is pretty stable with or without him. Good last year too, So I mean, like that, the pace of stuff, and I know that he's new and it's only been 3 games, but that number in obviously, very limited minutes is pretty jarring. And I think the eye test kind of confirms that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously playing with very small sample size theater is tricky, and so we'll see. It'll be fun to check back in a couple of weeks what it looks like. I don't think it's particularly surprising, especially with the way that some of the rotations work out, and what those second units without Kyle kind of look like on the floor, especially as he kind of stokes up more of the Bam related minutes. I think expecting a significantly strong offensive performance with Mr. Dwayne Dedmon, who I have all the respect in the world for, is probably a little over the top. But I'm curious to kind of see how it develops over time. I think there's a couple things that have been interesting from the perspective of watching games in the arena. I'm finally able to get back to games now, which has been nice. Kyle's doing a lot of coaching from the sideline, particularly with Tyler. There's a couple instances in that Milwaukee game where when the timeout on the floor and Kyle's running out the half court and walking Tyler through what he saw, what Tyler saw, and all that good stuff. So I think give that some time and kind of let everybody mesh. We've got another, with Max out there, who I kind of think Max actually is a pretty good player. This is his first real rotation minutes. He's got to kind of be figuring that out too. So I'm curious to kind of see how it holds up over the long haul. I'm not going to put too much into 3 games, one of which again is just in Indiana, where clearly the nightlife just takes over for the Heat. But yeah, I think watching Tyler try to figure that role out, being the lead guard in the backup with the second units can be kind of interesting, and I do think it'll fall into place a little bit, but that shot creation is going to be tough.
Dos Minutos. I'm sorry. Danny, it threw you off. I got to be better than that. Dos Minutos in chat says these Kyle Lowry stats are very interesting. When does the dairy talk start? This is the most inside Twitter thing ever. It's so self-indulgent. It's so great. That's interesting what you said about Kyle and the coaching of Tyler, because then Tyler comes out and says, I've never really played with a point guard like this, which I felt bad. Siobhan, I felt bad for Gogi. I was like, you can't do Gogi. I mean, he's a young guy. I know he doesn't mean it that way, but I was like, God damn, imagine if you're Goran and you're in the locker room, you're coming off a loss. Your offense scored 80 points again because no one can score, right? Fed VanVleet is always 3 for 17 now. And then you read Tyler's man, it's great to play with a real point guard. I mean, what the fuck?
I mean, so you said, I don't think he meant it like that, but no, I think he genuinely meant it. I know that, no, but without any malice, right? We were talking about it a bit last night too. The difference between and maybe a more scoring dominant point guard and a more table setter, a more distributing point guard. Gogi was a kind of score first. Those were the areas where we needed Gogi to bend the defense, to get in the lane, to make tough finishes. We weren't asking Goran to set the table and to put Bam in position to do those things. And so, yes, it is different. It's refreshing probably for Tyler to have someone like that, right? He is getting coached up on the sideline. Kyle is telling Tyler the spots that Kyle sees. And I think Tyler is taking it in, right? When we were dependent on Tyler last season to play make and to handle the ball and to do those things, he didn't do them very well. But with a point guard whose primary role is to do those things, he's free up to score and be, the natural scorer that he is. And also his playmaking has come on, probably because one, it's, a little bit less pressure, and because he has other eyes who are trained and able to see the areas and the things that that Tyler could be looking for.
So, Bon, we had the host of the Weird Al pregame show, or as we call it internally, the WAP. He tweeted out, worth noting, Hero was a mess of a facilitator last year, and the Heat allowed him to fail, allowed him to play through it. The coaching staff backed him consistently and clearly. They created an environment conducive to youth development. It's what good sports teams do. We've been very easy to say that Tyler lacked the strength to play at the game at the high level. Would that have been easy to say? Would have I'm bad at reading today. I'm Stugatz. Would it have been easy to say that his ceiling was low and they got off better moving him? But good teams are patient and invest in their own decisions. I read that incredibly poorly. But the point is, and I know you don't buy like a ton into Heat culture, but I've always said like probably a lot of the Heat culture stuff is like propaganda to sell shirts and stuff, right? But I think it's more of it's true, dude. Those culture shirts sell like hotcakes. I have one. They're good. I have two, red and black. But and they're comfortable. But the idea of like you have this stability in your front office, right? Like Pat and Andy are never like working for their job, right? Eric's never coaching for his job, right? These people know, and Arison is like a good owner. Like everybody's happy with him internally, right? Like nobody's like pissed off at him, like Sarver, right? So when you have these people in these positions where they're like, I don't need to, I don't gotta like take risks, right? I don't gotta do things for the short term. You allow your young players like Tyler, and I think that is kind of the basis of Heat culture. That's not super, because if you look at San Antonio, it's the same thing, right? It's like these like very stable positions up top.
I super buy into that part. It's kind of some of the nut jobs on Twitter and like just all of the extra, we don't need this, we don't need that, like all of the unnecessary kind of bravado. But as far as cultural stability and like organizational stability, you're absolutely right. Like it does do something, like you said, to not be in a position where you're like coaching for your life. And so you feel like you have to go and make all of these knee-jerk decisions and reactions to affect winning. But Miami has historically been one of the organizations that have been better at player development, at just organizational stability, period. And so those things are absolutely true and are the parts of Heat culture that I 100% kind of salute and agree with.
Like Danny, we have like every first day of the season, it's like, okay, the Utah Jazz are gonna get off to a hot start because they have continuity, right? There's fucking continuity talk right, and obviously it matters. But like these people have front office continuity, right? And I think that I don't know. I think that matters almost as much as like the whole 5 a.m. practice. Alonzo Mourning will throw Tim Hardaway through a brick wall for Pat Riley, or like I don't know. That shit matters to me. Like it legitimately makes a difference.
Oh, it's a huge difference. Difference maker. Having been around there and kind of experienced what goes on in the practice facility and the different relationships that coaching staff has with the players is really interesting and I think impactful when you're around it. When LeBron left, or after LeBron left, Spo really reshaped that whole coaching staff. If you look back at who was on the bench for those title teams and then who was on the bench kind of going forward, it's a really developmentally focused staff. And I don't think it's by accident. I think Spo surrounded himself with a bunch of younger guys, younger coaches, whether it's Chris Quinn or Karan or Anthony Carter, who have been, have experience playing in the league, and who are guys who are very fundamentally and tactically sound. And so having those guys be invested in the young players from the beginning, I think really pays off. Someone like Chris Quinn is very involved, especially with the guard development. That was he was the one working with Tyler Johnson and Jay Ridge down in Sioux Falls, and then when they got up up and joined the big club. And I think if you go back, or if you go and watch, Warren's pregame, I suspect you're going to see him getting Tyler loose and getting ready. And I think that having that kind of stability actually really matters, because that's a coach who's invested in you, not just in the short term, but also in the long term, which that doesn't really happen a lot in the league. You look at all the shakeups that happen, everywhere, every offseason. It's just not a thing that happens with the Heat. And so, yeah, some of the culture stuff can get a little bit overboard, but I think that the real culture is just grounded in hard work and like caring about one another. And you step foot in that facility, it's real. It's real. And I think you see Bam's development. I not even just the guys on the roster now, but just look back, what we were doing with young guys, kind of before 2014 and what it looks like after the fact. It's produced a lot of
Danny.
Yeah, a lot of really good young players, a lot of guys who, were on the fringes and became solid rotation players who then ended up getting paid, which is awesome. And I think that's kind of where that ties back into.
Danny, could you give people a little bit of your background?
I mean, no, man, I was very loud and vocal on Twitter before. I worked for the Heat for 7 seasons, starting in the 2012 season, so 12 through 18. working on all the digital stuff. I work with Cooper Moorhead, so if anyone sees me giving Coop a bunch of shit on Twitter all the time, it's just because I love the guy. Just mess with him constantly. But yeah, so I started off on the digital side and kind of filled a bunch of different roles there, covering the team, writing stuff, leading like fan engagement type things, all the Twitter and Facebook stuff with my guy Sed, who's still there running the show. So I kind of did a bunch of stuff, spent a lot of time around the team on the basketball side. It was fun.
I should have led with that. I'm like, yeah, this is dickhead from Twitter. He's pretty good.
Yeah, it reduced you to a Twitter personality.
I can't believe I did that. I mean, you're one of us, Danny.
It's what I am now, man. It's all I do is sit there and let shit fly late at night. So
welcome. Fez Butter in chat asks, "Is tomorrow night gonna suck, Danny?"
Same answer as always. No.
Kind of piggyback to your point about like the coaches being invested in you. Dwayne has told this story a bunch. Like Spo is shagging balls for him, right? Like this dude, like Dwayne working on his jumper, right? All the, whatever the star he became, that was Eric with him at the gym late at night. That was Eric getting all the misses and the makes and all that. And like, they have a brotherhood, man. Like, I think maybe Pat's relationship with Dwayne was a little bit rocky at all times, but I think the Eric relationship with Dwayne was really solid. And you could kind of see when he came back I think the two happiest people were like Justice and Spo. Justice was fucking happy, and Spo was Spo is like this very stoic, like poker face kind of guy. Yeah. He'll only show you what he wants. That dude was legitimately fucking like, he was effervescent when Dwayne came back. It was really cool to see.
That's what Jimmy's agent though. Like, didn't he speak about that was one of the things that like drew Jimmy to it, was just the structure, the organizational stability, the family kind of like all for one type of mentality.
They've done some shit, Siobhan. Go ahead, Danny.
I was saying, look where Jimmy's been. Chicago has been a complete mess with Garpax, and then he goes to Minnesota where like Tibbs is just trying to throw everything at the wall, and the whole Philly situation. I mean, you got to be craving stability, and I know that sometimes that frustrates people about the Heat, but like, I think it's a real benefit on the basketball side.
Absolutely.
That's a good point about Jimmy kind of going and like, even now, I mean, the Bulls are in total upheaval, and if like, I know that everybody's really high on Chicago and they beat the Pistons twice, right? So they're 4-0, but I mean, 2 points against the Pistons. I mean, come on, slow the fuck down. You beat Kelly Olynyk twice. Oh. Chill. Yeah, I mean, whatever. But like they're really all in. They had a really young core of guys and picks, and that's all. Everything from the Butler trade is gone. They just have Levine, who's gonna be a free agent, and if he walks, if they have a disappointing season, if he walks, and then what, Jimmy? I mean, I guess one of the picks was Wendell Carter, which then became Vucevic. So I mean, you see like kind of the decisions made from a Star's departure to now, and then how that really different, because Stars don't leave the Heat except for the one that did, and then obviously the Dwayne debacle, but he came back, and that shit was so cool. I'm a Dwayne lifer. Siobhan, let's listen. We're 20 minutes in, and we got to get into what the argument that nobody on the internet knows except for the 12 of us in the Heat group chat.
Let's do it.
So Markeiff Morris is the backup power forward for Miami, and I think he's been a little up and down from preseason to now. Obviously played an incredible game. And I'm going to start with my position, and then we can get to yours. I'm not crazy about him at that spot for Miami because I value the spacing that a more stretchy wing provides. I think Markeiff provides some toughness. And I do think that there are places for him to succeed, as you have tweeted out, kind of his operation and pick and roll with Dedmon, as a spacer in those sets, especially because Dwayne has been a more willing shooter this season. You kind of hope that keeps up. I just look at Markeiff. I think Markeiff's defense is really good too. And I think part of Tyler, if Tyler's going to be this good, you just need those bench lineups to survive, because it's probably going to be like Tyler plus, whether they settle on it's Jimmy or Lowry with him, right? So you're going to have, Tyler with one of those two guys. Right on cue, baby. So you just need Markeiff to help you survive. You need to put enough offense out there to you not. So, I understand the benefits of him. I just don't. I look at him as a negative floor spacer, and I think the playoffs, that starts to become incredibly tenuous. And you know what I mean? So that's kind of my thing with Markieff. And I know that, you're a little higher on him than me.
So my thing with Markieff is that I think that you are thinking about spaces that like aren't already there for him to take and to be effective in. So like, yeah, I understand the value of wanting a forward that can maybe stretch the floor, a la, I guess, a Kelly Olynyk-esque type of figure. However, it's not like Markieff is not finding space on the floor in the actions that they run and that they do anyway. I actually just managed to get out my thread about like the good, the fine, and something about what we've seen from Markieff. But a lot of the good is him operating in the same areas that like a Bam does. Bam's not going to be your floor spacer, and the two of them may or may not play much together. I think that's where you have some contention. If you have like a lot of Keith Bam minutes heavy, then I can see where you can say that your lane or whatever gets clogged. But the guards are coming off of the pick and rolls, and they're either stopping and popping or like trying to be effective at the nail, at the elbow area, or they're dumping it off to a Markieff who's taking the same shots that I know I lamented Bam all last season for not taking. And so, I understand the value in having someone that can create more space to operate, but it's not as if he is necessarily clogging up the space that they want to operate in. You just need them to kind of survive. You don't need him to go out and like wow you. You need him to be steady. There's spaces that he can be steady in mid-range, and they have a lot of screen across the lane actions that he can be steady and effective under the basket.
Danny, do you think I'm too harsh when I said I want Markeiff Morris excommunicated?
That is what he said in the chat.
that might be a bridge too far. I mean, I think the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle here. Markieff is like fine. He's your backup for on a minimum contract who is tough. And when Mo Wagner, started trying to start some shit yesterday, like he put a very quick end to that. And I do think like some of the
culture, right?
can get, yeah, exactly. It can get a little bit overrated, but last year we were a little soft. I don't think Mo Harkless is going after anybody like that.
No,
so
except on Twitter. On Twitter, he has quick with the Twitter fingers.
After he misses the playoffs, and then he starts talking shit. But yeah, I think like Keith is fine. I'm not a huge fan of a guy that just hoists a bunch of jumpers from 18 feet, but the regular season is very long. I have a lot of faith that eventually they'll be able to find someone to plug that role. They've done it each of the last 2 years with Trevor, Jay, Andre, and even like Heat beat legend Solomon Hill. So I think
friend of the pod.
Yeah, something will pop up and something will shake loose. They're not like I don't think invested in Markieff being a big piece going forward. And while I share your a lot of kind of thoughts about the playoffs with him, I don't suspect that Keith is gonna be part of that playoff rotation. I could be wrong, but I think that's
they're like a wing away, Danny.
Yeah,
like if they get like in my eyes, I mean, I think ideally I'd want PJ. Maybe not PJ off the bench, but I'd want PJ playing the second most minutes at the 4 because I think if you upgrade might be tough because that kind of position is the most valuable thing in the league right now. And they're not really available, right? Because, like a guy like Gallinari, just not available right now. Rudy Gay, not available. All these guys are on good teams that are trying to win. That's why I always talk about Harrison Barnes. By the way, sneaky Harrison Barnes season right now. Let me tell you something. He's really balling out. I've been saying that. I've been saying it for years. And you look for guys that might be available, but like teams like Sacramento, man, that's a young team. They're trying to win games, right? And Miami doesn't have, this is one of the first years that the Heat don't have a bunch of mid-level contracts to just throw at shit, right? You have Duncan, who's on really the only tradable contract, right? Because at this point, I mean, you got to keep Tyler at the production with his money, right? Like so, and by the way, you just can't trade Tyler for anything because that money doesn't match. So you have Lowry, Bam, and Jimmy, which obviously you're not moving. And then, you have a bunch of, minimums, and then you have like Duncan, right, eating your cap. So it's I do think that I agree with you. I mean, if they get a buyout guy, and I hope that that's like kind of the plan. And it seems to be because they did leave the roster spot open, right? So that would suggest to me. And I know we've talked in our group chat too about like bring a guy in like Isaiah Thomas or bring in like somebody to play backup point guard. But I think that they've I think they've listen. I think if Wall becomes available, they absolutely jump on that. But I do think that they're saving that spot for someone who kind of they feel could be a legit difference maker, not the roll of the dice.
Fair.
I guess. Right.
I agree with that. I mean, I've tried every combo of see like on the trade machine to see who's out there, but I do think like it's the same thing that they did with Joe Johnson a few years back. And Trevor obviously was not a buyout last year. We had to swap out the guy who shall not be named, but
redacted.
Yeah,
Redacted.
But if not, he would have been bought out too, and that's kind of maybe he would have gone somewhere else. But I think that's been kind of their plan the last few years, and I suspect it's probably a similar one this year. An opportunity will present itself, whether it actually is worth it or not, will be interesting. And also kind of see it's not my money, so I don't really care. But the luxury tax implications are obviously very real, especially if you get a good year from Vic and want to sign him to a multi-year deal. So I don't know. They got a lot of things in play, but again, I suspect they've done it time and time again. They've done it the last couple of years. They'll find someone who can play that 3-4, and kind of be a little bit stretchy and make things easier, I think.
But then also, like a couple years ago, they wanted Markeiff. I can't remember if it was Markeiff or Marcus, but they were after one of them, and then whatever went down. Marcus. Okay, that's fine.
The good one.
That's what I said. Well, like even the good one. So I always call. How did we get both bad twins?
Yeah. It's tough.
I mean, that has to be the first time.
Caleb is the worst of the bad twins, I'll say.
Yeah. he's the other one's better. And then
Cody.
Obviously, Cody. It's hard. No, wait.
Yeah, Caleb and Cody Martin.
Oh, so there's the Zeller twins too. There's a Cody Zeller and there's another Zeller, right?
Yeah.
There's too
Tyler
many.
Zeller.
And they were also Hornets.
Tyler.
Yeah. Oh
Yes,
my God!
they were.
Too many Cody twins on the Hornets. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I'm surprised by the way that Martin hasn't played. I thought he might have a little bit of a role, but it just and Gabe, by the way, too. Like when they're all like locked and loaded, like Keith's the last guy.
Yeah.
And they've cut that bench real short, which is weird for a Spo team so early. He loves to just kind of throw his hand in the bag and see what works. But Danny, that's been like kind of surprising that they're kind of like 8 men right now, 8-9 men.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious to see. I think the way that the preseason gets approached now is a little bit different than it was a few years ago, and so I do think that this first 10 to 20 game stretch probably is a little bit more of a feel out period than in years past. And so we had maybe one preseason game where the starters all played, and so I think you get. You shorten your rotation, see what you got now, and then I wouldn't be surprised to see it expand a little bit as we get into December and kind of the slog of the middle part of the season where you want to start getting guys, nights off. But I think for right now, I think Spo just kind of wants to see what he's got. And I happen to like Gabe. I don't really think that, he's necessarily pressing for minutes right now. But yeah.
I think they
Gabe.
want to get off to a good start, right? I feel like we didn't get off to that great of a start last season. And so let's get off to a good to decent or decent to good start. And then, like you said, in the slog of the season, start playing with things.
And their schedule's fucking brutal off the start. I mean, they open against the Bucks. At Indiana's not an easy game. You get the Magic. And then pretty much after that, I mean, they play the Nets, right? And then they play Denver next week too. And they play the Mavs and they play the Celtics. And a bunch of road games. So it's
Jazz,
their schedule.
The Grizzlies, the Hornets.
Yeah. Oh, that at Grizzlies game, Danny, that's a fucking L. We talked about it in the group chat. Your face. Listen, we've watched youth basketball for a long time. That's a fucking L.
I'm just chalking that up. I'll have something else to do that night.
It's just there are certain games that no, that's it. You know what's funny? I talked about this. I don't remember if it was a pregame show or where. That at Sacramento game has been kind of testy lately. They never win at Sacramento or at Minnesota anymore. It's so weird.
It's hard to win road games. People just think it's easy. It is not fun. I got to do a little bit of that traveling, and that stuff sucks. You get into town at 3:00 in the morning, and if it's a back-to-back, you got to be up and ready to go. When it comes to this team kind of reminds me a little bit of 2 years ago. I'm not saying they're gonna make the finals, but just beat the crap out of really bad teams on the road, kind of hang and beat teams that are below you, and it's going to be a tough slog with good teams. But that was kind of the blueprint back then. I think it'll be kind of be similar this year.
Yeah, I mean and their health is going to be like of note this year as well. Like,
Absolutely.
how many Lowry especially, right? Like, I mean, there's not much to be said there. That just and we don't have enough sample yet because I mean the numbers right now are unfair. Like, if you look at Dwayne Dedmon's on-off stats, Dwayne Dedmon without Markieff, they're like plus 33 net rating. So like everything's we're still 3 games in, and 2 of them were like monster blowouts. So like nothing makes sense, but. I want to look at like the Heat's pace numbers with and without Kyle, probably when we're like 10, 15 games in. Kind of really want to see because I mean, I feel that Siobhan, they have such an initiative to run and to play fast, and that's just not a Spo thing.
Right.
Even when he claimed we're pace and space, right? They were one of the slowest teams in the league, but kind of Kyle's reinvigorated them in a way. They're playing quick, they're getting up and down the floor, and no more handoffs take for. I'm starting to realize handoffs just take forever to set up.
Yes.
Forever.
So about Kyle and pushing pace, right? So yes, they have been a bit reinvigorated to get up the floor, but and I've said this a lot in the group chat too. Like there's a difference between like the type of pace that Miami can play with currently and like a Hornets type of pace, right? Like fucking race all night, like back and forth, pew, pew, pew.
Those kids scare me.
Then they should, because they can do that. They can maintain that. Miami, I think, needs to find a balance between the lies that Spo told us about being fast and when we really were just walking up the floor, and kind of what Kyle is enabling them to do now. Kick aheads, leaks and runouts are, good outlet passes, fantastic. But like a lot of like pounding the ball, dribbling coast to coast, that's not what this team is. It's not what this team has ever been. And I don't want them to lull themselves into, or like fans to get into this idea that that's the type of pace that this team needs to play with. But yes, with Kyle and with the look aheads and the leak outs, like you said, we're getting easier points. We're not getting into the action of the offense with like 11 seconds left and now Bam has to shoot some bullshit. Like we're either getting quick looks or we're able to set up quicker, and so we're getting more efficient looks that way.
I think Bam's also been like go ahead, Danny.
And I think we have a lot of guys who get their hands on the ball a lot, right? And so like last night, Dwayne had a couple of really nice strips, those long ass arms just poking it out. Whoever gets the ball is immediately looking up and going, and 100% there's some tie-in from Kyle's influence there, and obviously when he's on the floor he's going to do that, but I think it also kind of takes like skill to make those passes, right? And so someone like Kendrick Nunn cannot like throw a pass that leads to an advantage in any situation, let alone on the break. We've seen Tyler throw a couple of really strong hit aheads, both already this season. I think my favorite pass that he's ever made is that bounce pass against the Celtics to close him out, to a cutting Iggy. And it takes a little bit of extra understanding. And I think you look around the floor and who's getting the minutes for the most part for the Heat now, and it's a lot of like really high IQ guys who understand where everyone is at all times. I think Jimmy's a really good example of that. And so it's not a surprise that you're going to get out there and run when, it feels like every 5 possessions, someone's getting their hand on a ball somewhere and it's off to the races.
And then they're swarming to those loose balls too. Like Dedmon will like get the initial strip, but he doesn't get the steal, but he gets like the initial poke and then he's gone and is relying on one of the other ones to secure it, knowing that they'll look ahead.
I thought it was really interesting too last night, and the Magic were just trying to find Jimmy with like such small guys, but they were positioning Jimmy pretty far up the court on basically every either like sideline out of bounds or free throw situation, and it felt like they hit him like 3 or 4 times on those kind of like fade patterns over the top. So it's an easy way to just kind of generate quick looks. And again, you have to have someone that can throw that pass, and we just haven't had many of those guys. Love Goran to death. He's also not one of those guys who's attacking the defense that way. So they have a better personnel for it this year.
They have a real chance to be like one of the best transition attacks in the league for what you're saying. I mean, they threw like, I don't know how many lobs to Jimmy. He looks spry, running down the floor, getting up, the leak out. Something that I like that they're doing this season, and it's a product of them playing drop, is they could keep a guy out at the 3-point line to collect those long rebounds, right? So they're still a help team from the corners. That's just what Spo's been doing lately. And so, they're going to be a team that yields threes, particularly from the corners. They will contest, But when those miss and you get before when they would miss those, everybody's crashing the boards because your defense is in rotation and you have unfavorable switches. Now, you're in a drop. Everyone's kind of where they got to be. And they have PJ usually at the top, so he can kind of collect that rebound, and then they can start leaking out and going. So I think it's just like incredibly huge for them. And it kind of shows that you just bring Kyle in and he just does a couple of the things you really need. And it really settles because like they were an awful rebounding team last year and Bam was under 10 rebounds. Man, we know that Bam's a good rebounder. There's just no, you know what I mean? He's always been a good rebounder. And that was just a weird season because of the product of the over switching. They still switch like guard stuff, which I like, right? And I think that in the playoffs, they're gonna have to go to that, like especially. I mean, I think the Nets, by the way, Shaban, when they play the Nets, I mean, that's something I'm gonna be looking for. Like, are you switching stuff? Like, okay, Bam's gonna be on whoever the 5 is, whether it's Claxton or LaMarcus Aldridge or Blake Griffin or whoever the hell is playing the 5 for them and those minutes. Are they gonna switch Bam onto KD? I'm curious on that because like that's a potential playoff opponent, and I want to see how that looks like.
It is, but I think you acquire a PJ and you bring in a backup in a Markeiff to kind of handle Kevin. PJ being able to
those are not bad options.
They're not bad options. And I think that's what you. I think that's kind of what you want, right? When we played Milwaukee. Traditionally, like for whatever reason or whatever the lineup machinations were, Bam wouldn't be matched up with Giannis. But we played, Milwaukee this season, and Spo let that be the matchup. And so I think he does keep Bam on their center and at least start the game seeing what he has with the combination of a PJ or a Markieff or, whatever else dealing with KD. I also think that Kyle's going to be important in that game. As far as defense at the guard spot, between the Nets game and the Hornets coming up, right? Like I think being able to contain, at least to an extent, these dynamic guards out front do a lot to, bring down the necessity of having to switch Bam out to anyone else other than a 5, maybe the 4.
So in that Bucks matchup, Giannis did start at the 5, so that's kind of
right.
it kind of forced him into it. Danny, I think that their uniqueness in the way that they play defense is that they can play a drop at a level that I think they can be the number 1 defense in the league. I legitimately think that they have. I mean, I was just watching it. I mean, again, 3-game sample, but I just think that they have the personnel if they're healthy enough that they could be the best defense in the league, and you could do that with a drop. And if it comes time to the playoffs, you're like, okay, we can have Oladipo, Jimmy, PJ, Bam, and Lowry, and we could switch everything they want. Like we'll switch everything. We'll be like, maybe you don't want to switch Oladipo onto KD, but if it does happen, there's been worse stuff. You know what I mean?
No, for sure. And I think like it's pretty clear that I should say, I think it's clear that what's going to end up happening over the course of the regular season. We are going to see a lot of different looks from Spo just to kind of see how everything reacts. I think playing the drop is, besides the fact that everyone looked so exhausted at the beginning of the Bucks season last year after running around, switching everything for 6 months after that finals run. I think
never talk about that enough.
Yeah, that was a mess. Everyone was hurt. Everyone was tired. I mean, Jimmy's whole back thing gets completely glossed over towards the end of the year. But I'm curious. I think that you'll see a lot of different looks thrown KD and James Harden's way. I mean, you can't give James the same look two, 3 times in a row. I think he's going to pick you apart that way. And I think that all the names that you mentioned, especially as you get towards the postseason when everyone's going full throttle, like. There's a reason why they're trying to find and fill out with like long, lanky, strong guys who can survive on a switch. Like no one's going to stop Kevin Durant. We saw that happen like last year with against the Bucks. Like the best defensive team in the NBA, they can't do anything with him. But you just got to kind of try to survive. And I think they've built themselves out to a point where they got a lot of like strong dudes who are thick, like pretty wiry, and will just give him at least a little bit of a hard time or an extra elbow in the rib cage if that's what's necessary. So.
I think for what it's worth too, right? Like, so Gabe is or what he isn't offensively, but there were times during the Nets matchups last season where Spo was comfortable by putting Gabe on James. James, like a KD, you're not going to stop. You're not going to hold those guys to, single digit numbers. But I think as someone like a Gabe, a Max who's kind of big and strong and physical, I think, they can give them issues a bit. Duncan's gotten a bit better, or a lot better positionally. Duncan's still not the best one-on-one defender against, dynamic guards, but I think that they do have, enough pieces to where they can mix and match and do some things to come out effective.
Duncan has to work on having quicker hands, because I think he's just never going to be able to be a lockdown guy. I think he's a lot better. I think he's an average defender because of how well he rotates, right? And I think that that's really half the battle. It's just when they're going to isolate you, and that's where it becomes an issue, right? When they start hunting you and put you on an island.
The Pacers were hunting him. Chris Duarte or whoever that guy is, they were seeking
him and Tyler. I mean, I was in overtime that they were just. I mean, it was Brogdon, and they're like, "Where the fuck?" Yeah, we're like, "Where the fuck is Tyler Hero?" And that went really bad. And I felt bad for Tyler because he had such a good game. And I like to be a hater, but yeah, I mean I felt bad for Tyler because I mean he's too small. But for Duncan, I think if you can develop some Iguodala, I mean obviously Andre's a fucking savant on defense, but some quick reach-ins to kind of do some disruptions. I think he tries, which is why he fouls a lot. So I mean that's just an ebb and flow that you kind of hope that he learns a little bit. Let's get into struggles now that you brought him up. Danny, are you worried? Because I'm not worried. I think last season he started off a little slow too. Let's not forget that he's played every single minute of every single game rather, since he became a full-time starter. So, I think he might need to get his legs under him a little bit, after the offseason. He was always in a rhythm, right? So he had the stoppage bubble and then right back into it. So I'm not too worried. I don't know. I want to get to Siobhan's after your take, but are you concerned?
No, if Duncan hits two more wide open threes that he's had the last couple of nights, then all of a sudden he's shooting 40% from three and nobody gives a shit.
We're back, baby.
So I think Duncan's fine. I think it was interesting last night at the game. Kyle was actually giving it to him pretty good after an offensive possession where he didn't like how Duncan came around to screen, and I think that's another thing. The whole
where he got fouled.
Yeah, and just
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Every function and machination of the offense is just a little bit different. And Duncan was such a centerpiece or central focus last year that I think it's going to take a little while for him to get accustomed to it. And then wasn't he bitching about the ball, the new ball, I think to Barry? He said he could tell the difference, between the Wilson ball and the Spalding ball. So
there's a difference. Oh my God, there's a difference.
So
I didn't know that.
Every
I forgot
ball
that they changed.
feels different.
Yeah, and so I think that's it sounds like a really dumb thing, but for someone who has his hands on the ball for only a split second every time, any little change to that could be a little bit wonky. So I would have cut him a little bit of slack there. But yeah, I just think you're dealing with small samples, the 3-pointers, high variance, and he takes a lot of really tough ones. If two more go in, he's shooting 40%. Everyone's talking about how Duncan's off to a great start. Instead, he's 8 for 25. I'm not too concerned.
That's a great point, Siobhan. Are you a little worried about Dunk?
So I am maybe worried isn't the word, but it's noticeable. And so to your point, Danny, about him shooting a lot of contested threes. Again, I've said this before too. Last season, he shot better from contested than he did from uncontested. And so my thing though with that this season is that I think that has to change a bit because of the variation and all of the things that they can do offensively. I think he's going to get more open looks than he's used to. And that's something for a shooter too, to have a guy sprinting past your face and still have a feel for the ball and get it off. And then to kind of all of a sudden be more open than you're used to. It's kind of oh shit, all right. And so I think that for me personally, I want to see Duncan hit a bit more of his open looks. Because it's not like he isn't getting, the same number of looks. They're just coming differently, and that's fine. They're going to come different with the style of offense that they're able to play now. My issue with Duncan, though, is that, kind of when those threes aren't falling for you, there is space on the floor to get other things. I would love to see a one dribble pull up from Duncan. He's coming off of, these pin downs and so used to flying around the horn, around the top of the key. There's area, there's space in that kind of elbow area to, maybe loosen the defense up a bit. And so I'm not worried, but I'm not like, it's not nothing for me. The what was it, like Levitar? What show was it where it was like, something, nothing, or everything? It's not everything and it's not nothing for me personally. It is something to be, for me personally, at least, to be cognizant of.
For me, I'm like, his movement leverages so much. And there was a possession last game where Kyle is running a pick and roll, but the screen comes a little late. And Duncan kind of comes up and like fakes a screen and then runs down the lane and then makes a right. And that movement gave Kyle just enough space, even though the screen was a little late and a little bad, to get in, get to the paint, and get to the basket. And that's just kind of what he does. I think he's a really smart player. I don't disagree with you, Siobhan, and I think he's a little bit kind of mechanical in the way that he wants to look for his shot. But I think that that's also what makes him special. So while, you'd like a little bit of variance in the diet, he is a specialist, right? And when they're at their best, it's when he's doing what he's best at. And I think he's a really good cutter. I think he knows when to do it and when not. I think he's a good, ghost, faking cuts, a great screener. I tweeted out a play in the Bucks game where Duncan comes to the middle of the floor, and it's a play that Miami likes to run to get Bam from the right to the left. And Duncan comes, screens in the middle of the floor and screens Giannis and gets his body into him and really picks him. And for a guy at his size, who's known as just a shooter, to be that physical with, this extraterrestrial 2-time MVP, he does a ton of stuff off the ball and just by his movement and his screening. So I don't disagree with you. So I kind of lean more to Danny because like I said, 2 more threes and that's fine. I just think it's like the gaudy, like what was he, like 2 for 9 yesterday or something like that? Yeah. So it's like that looks bad, right? It's like, and I get it, but I'm happy.
Yesterday isn't the only game, and that's been my thing too. Like it's not like
he was good in the Indiana game though. I know that you guys say like he hit that garbage time 3, but oh well. By the way, Duncan was killing the off-ball shots, the dead ball threes. My man, Danny knows. My man was wet. He was killing the dead ball threes. I know, yeah, but man, I was like, oh, they're going in.
Right. Hey, if you see it going through the rim, whatever.
That's what I'm. Listen, I'm a Dwayne Wade lifer. I just know that Dwayne's dead ball threes never went in. That's all I'm saying.
That's fine.
he's a great shooter. I think if we're in January and that happened last year. He was, God forbid, he was 38% in January. We were like, yeah, is Duncan overrated, right? And then
he's a specialist, so people are looking for him to be special.
Well, by the way, like the second half, like he had I think for his reputation, he had a struggle last season. And then this season, and then toward the back post All-Star break, he was the second best shooter in the league behind Steph Curry by volume and by volume and by percentage and any metric you want. So I think he's legit. I'm not worried that what he did every other year was a mirage. He's clearly a special shooter. And I think, I legitimately think he's going to be like one of the, by the end, like one of the 10 best, percentage or volume or make shooters. Like he's that good. And he's shooting, how many is it, like 8 a game still? That's what you love to see. Let it fly, man.
He's getting them. The looks are there.
He's getting. They're not the same kind of looks though, because it's not come off a handoff. Yeah. And I think that's part of it. I think he'll get it. He doesn't get a ton of spot ups. I don't think he likes spot ups.
And I said this too. He's a better shooter off the move, but he has to get out of that because he's going to get a lot more spot ups this season.
So, Danny, one of the things that I was worried about when they got Ariza was because, before Kelly was there, before Trevor was there, Kelly wouldn't stand in a corner, right? Kelly was like a topside guy. Duncan will come off Kelly's screens and then go to the corner. So so that way that help doesn't come. So if Jimmy's running, or Jimmy and Goran are running a pick and roll up top, when they get to the basket, that corner man's not there to help because Duncan's moving. He's locating there. So those corner threes that he gets are from relocation. Now, when you have Tucker in the corner, you can't do that. So I think it just throws him off his axis a little bit.
No, 100%. I was going to say that everyone's occupying different real estate now than they were a year ago. And I think for someone like him, whose job is to just, be on the move nonstop, getting comfortable with where everyone at. And that's where I think some of the miscommunication was yesterday with Kyle, but like understanding where everyone likes to be or like needs to be in maybe PJ's case, is going to take a little bit of time. And I for sure think that that's something that's kind of, mess with him. And I think that kind of tied back to what we were talking about earlier. That's why you're seeing a lot of these guys, like a smaller rotation, these guys getting a lot of burn together right now, is that you may as well figure it out now, and kind of understand how everyone feels while everyone's healthy and like able-bodied before the injuries start to set in. So I think that's going to take a little bit of time for him to get used to.
I'm not worried. Jimmy, by the way, and we're running on time. Incredible bounce back. I love him off the ball. He's a fucking menace. Much. He's a menace. He's like, I think one of the things that I was annoyed with Jimmy is like he would always dribble into the center of the floor and never go baseline. I don't know if that's like an aversion to dribbling with his left hand, but it was always frustrating because he catch the ball on the right side and then dribble like into help. Now when he's off ball, he's rolling, he's cutting, he's jumping, he thrives in chaos. And Kyle is an orchestrator of chaos. It's perfect.
Yeah. I loved yesterday. I thought he was awesome, and he was awesome when Cole Anthony was defending him every other possession. I don't know what Orlando was doing there, and I thought him getting he got a lot of like really good early position down low, and so it was like quick decisions and quick hitters. But actually, I loved his game against Milwaukee, where it's basically they're spreading the floor and he was just putting his shoulder into everybody's chest and putting him into the stanchion. That's my favorite Jimmy. And I know that like you can't do that every day because it's going to hurt a lot. He took a couple like hard spills yesterday too. But yeah, he is just such a badass. And watching him the last few years has been great. And it's fun to kind of see the different ways with like where he can attack. Because it felt like yesterday he just woke up and decided he wanted to score 30, and so he was just going to do it. And I don't know. He's an interesting player. He's so different, and I feel like him and Kyle are similar in that way. In that like they don't do what you want them to do in a lot of senses. Like they're gonna do what they want to do at all times. Thankfully, because they're better decision makers than we are. But it's all funky and all a little bit different. It's really fun to watch.
I'm loving Jimmy off the ball. Like Jimmy able to like approach the game from a scoring standpoint without the burden of knowing that he's someone that wants to get other guys going, wants to see Bam get his first few touches, wants to pump some life and kind of some enthusiasm into Tyler's game, right? He has someone now whose literal job that is to do those things. And so he can focus on other areas of the game where I know that he knows Miami needs him to be effective. So yeah, Jimmy in bully ball is fantastic to watch. I had a little bit of a debate last season about, Jimmy not being a natural offensive talent. And I still don't think that he is, but he has worked himself into knowing his spots on the floor, knowing where he likes to get, how to use his body, how to be effective. Jimmy's like top 3 in the league in body control. He'll take the contact and still finish, which is a bit why I was a little annoyed with him in the Pacers game. I think he was pressing a lot and like just looking for fouls and not focus as he typically is on the finish. But him with just kind of like being freed up to play and to pick his spots where he wanted to be, a dog and to be a scorer, I think is going to be huge for them. And he just looks rested. He has his legs. He's catching oops. He's catching alleys. I think
careful though. Got to be careful.
Right. Yes. Please relax just a little bit. He fell on the ball yesterday.
Yeah.
One of those hard spills. That hurts. I don't know if
PJ got to relax.
But that's been PJ's whole kind of career, and Jimmy's to an extent too. But
no.
Yeah, no, he has to settle down a bit. We need you now to do.
We're the weird fans are like, no, don't try as hard as you can.
Right, try 87% as hard as you can.
That building, Danny, that building more so than almost any building in the league. They love a fucking charge and they love a hustle play. I don't know if that's just me drinking the Kool-Aid. That place goes fucking nuts when a dude takes a charge.
That's Eric Reed pumping into your ears every other night for the last 30 years, man. Like he loves when guys put their bodies in the way, and yeah, it's so funny. I love it. And Mike B hammers it like every time with the call. He's so good at that. So yeah, it's not a surprise, man. It's the best.
I agree with the legend. We love it. Danny, okay, so we're wrapping up here. We were in the middle of basketball talk. We got to give a shout out to nice guy Danny. Dos Minutos in the chat said, Danny's the best dude. When he worked for the Heat, he sent a huge shipment of Heat basketballs to my house so I can distribute them to the neighborhood kids who played at my driveway. Those balls are still around. Kids still bring them over to shoot. They're all worn, but they love them. Look at that. Nice guy Danny.
Hey, man, just do what we can.
Don't ever help Dos again, though. Dos probably told all those kids that he bought those balls. With
100% he did.
Oh, yeah, no. Dos is not. Yeah, you are an upstanding citizen. There's no way that Dos Minutos is.
Dos has been watching this episode, G, waiting for him to get his freeze frame of you that he can use in his next, his bit of
the meme, yeah.
The
meme.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I used to get.
There it is, right there, right behind the head. That's it.
Oh, yeah. Just. I love Dos. Shout out to the Deuces, even though they're a competitor. I want them to die. Danny, where can people find you on social?
I'm just on Twitter, Danny Martinez 4. A lot of Boston Celtics shit talk and pretty much nothing else. So, yeah, that's where I'm at.
I live for Boston slander. What'd you think of? So we've had to show Siobhan the ropes on how to hate the Knicks fans because Knicks fans suck. So she's learning. What did you think of that ridiculous Knicks video when they won one game in the regular season?
That was perfect. It was almost as good as when they beat Atlanta in that one game in the playoffs, went nuts, and then just destroyed.
Bing bong.
The Bing bong is great. I love the Magic tweeting that out after they beat them.
What the fuck is Bing bong? Because someone sent that to me. What is it?
Have you seen the Knicks video of all the Knicks fans going absolutely crazy after the game?
I never pressed play on it though.
Okay, you should.
You gotta do it.
It's kind of funny.
Okay.
They're ridiculous. My favorite one is Katie McGregor could not come into the Knicks. And I was like, you won one game in the regular season. What are you talking about? Those people are ridiculous. It's also really fun. Bond, people can find you where for the pod audience that can't see your that's on screen.
Pod audience, I am at Great Gray Matter on Twitter. That is GR8 Gray Matter. And then at all of our Heat Beat places.
Guys, website, we have a new website coming, so be on the lookout for that. We're excited to debut new content. We're kind of working through it, so we have some cool stuff for you this season. We're going to get back to blogging and writing and doing other kinds of content. Siobhan and I are actually working on maybe a new little YouTube show, new little things kind of coming your way. Using her expertise well. And, hopefully, Danny, you'll come on again because you were incredible and it was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Anytime.
The best of us. And you can follow me at Janabas103. By the way, to our patrons, I'm going to schedule the watch party for this month soon. So be on the lookout at our Patreon page. If you want to join us, subscribe to that. We've been talking about kind of thinking about new things to do with the Patreon. So be on the lookout for that as well. And if you're a Twitch sub, we appreciate you. If you're on the YouTube, please subscribe, man. I mean, what the fuck are you doing? I know some of y'all watch and don't subscribe because I do that, right? So there are channels that I watch that I'm not subscribed to. And I was like, wait a second, why am I not subscribed? You don't know how much it helps. It really helps against the algorithm. So all that, remember to check out Hangover Time tomorrow after Heat Nets or whenever after any game. We do it after every game in the Weird Al pregame show, which I'm producing a lot of times with Jack and Frankie and whoever else comes on Heat Beat. So take a look out for there. And we're excited. This is a fun season. And, bing bong.